Okay? Okay. I've been given the signal. Okay, since everyone here has some experience with meditation, we can sit together. Do feel free to follow the meditation system that you are accustomed to. I'm very much a fan of having the versatility of mind to be able to change practices, to be able to experiment a little bit. This is what I call the Hitchhiker's Guide to Buddhism. It means you can jump ship, whatever car is taking you in roughly the right direction, then you can get on board. Otherwise, what happens is people get very attached to a particular system, and you can go for years and years trying to hack out one particular meditation method, when really you may have gone beyond that method, or maybe another method is going to make more sense for you. I myself have jumped ship many a time and listened to different teachers and different methods, and it kind of takes a long time, but then you can accumulate or assemble your own practice. And I very much think we should trust people to put together their own practice. Otherwise, especially as teachers, they start to get into guiding too much, saying you should do this, you should do that, and then the teacher might not know. They don't know what's going on in your mind. You're the person who knows. So my own feeling is we should rely on Dharma. So we listen to Dharma, we practice, we try different teachers, different teachings, different methods, and different things will work at different times. Sometimes loving kindness will be your practice. I myself was not very good at loving kindness. I was very good at equanimity, but I think it was a kind of don't care, don't want to know kind of equanimity in my early years. And loving kindness I wasn't so good at, because it's universal. And I could have loving kindness to my cat, but universal loving kindness, I would have had a list of people that I didn't include. Took me a long time before I could find it. And when I did find it, it's like, wow, okay, now I know what that means, universal loving kindness. It took me years and years to find that. Sometimes being mindful of one thing is good, then another thing is good, then you get inspired. Little Advaita, Ramana Maharshi, what's his name, Osho. So you pick up these different practices, and from time to time they start to slot into place. And you say, oh, okay, and your practice then advances. So I'm very much in favor of this, rather than the idea of having a set meditation method that you hack out week after week, year after year, doing the same thing. So we're going to sit together, this session being meditated with a monk. So settle yourself into your meditation posture. Make a determination that this is the time for meditation. This is not the time for thinking, worrying, planning, desiring. With this determination, you should be able to put aside all kinds of thinking. What is it like to be living without thought, grounding the attention in the body, accumulating your consciousness, gathering your conscious forces. Being careful not to fall into sleepiness or tiredness. Or if the tiredness is too strong, to be aware of it. Being careful not to fall into desiring. Desiring a different body, different feelings, different mind state, different place. Being careful not to fall into worrying and thinking with a scattered mind that's jumping around. Being careful not to fall into doubting or wondering too much. Is this the right way, the wrong way? Am I capable? Am I incapable? It's all another stream of thinking. Putting aside these 5 hindrances, one sits mindful, alert, unremitting energy, knowing yourself the whole time, grounded in the body. One breath, 10 breaths, 100 breaths. Applying patience. So we'll sit together for 20 minutes or so. For the last few minutes of the meditation, turn your mind, your attention to loving kindness, metta, universal well-wishing for all world beings. Calling this into your mind using any method you know how to arouse, stimulate, encourage, foster this beautiful mind state, sobhana citta. The more you generate a mind state, the easier it is for that state to arise in the future. So we take some time, a few minutes, to call into the mind this beautiful, universal, loving kindness. May all beings everywhere, in every state, be free from suffering. Sabhe buddha balapata pachekanancha yang balang arahantanancha tejena rakang bandami sabhaso sabha buddha nubhavena sattha soti bhawantute sabhe buddha balapata pachekanancha yang balang arahantanancha tejena rakang bandami sabhaso Sabadhammanubhavena sattha soti bhawantute Sabhe buddha balapata pachekanancha yang balang arahantanancha tejena rakang bandami sabhaso Sabasanghanubhavena sattha soti bhawantute. Okay, relax your posture. He stayed quiet all the way through. That was very impressive. When I was his age, you'd have to pay me to do that. So according to Chinese Buddhism, the world is carried on the back of a turtle. What do you think? Is this true or not true? Is the world really carried on the back of a turtle or not carried on the back of a turtle? Some people were asking me this because they'd seen the image. And they said, do Buddhists really believe the world is carried on the back of a turtle? Well, I can't speak for Buddhists, but I know I do. For sure. So the story goes that in Buddhism, when we analyze experience, we analyze into 6 senses. So we have the eye, the nose, the mouth or the tongue, the ear, the body, and the mind. The mind is considered a sense because you can sense your thoughts and feelings, something you can be aware of. Also, those thoughts and feelings can stop, but you don't stop. One of the important reflections on no self. So what represents the 6 senses is the one animal with 6 limbs, is a turtle. So the turtle has a head, and look at me like that, has a head, it has arms and legs. Or does it just have legs? It just has legs, really. And a tail, right? 6 limbs. Has 6 limbs. So the turtle represents the person who has 6 senses. And when your senses are activated, the world appears. When the senses are disactivated, unactivated, then the world disappears. So, according to the Buddha, if you think the world is not real, you have not seen the arising of the world. If you think the world is real, you have not seen the cessation of the world. So the term the world in Buddhism is equated to the 6 senses. When you sense something, you activate this idea and this interaction with the world. So what happens? You see something, you smell something, you taste something, then your consciousness goes to that thing. Note that this is only one thing at a time. Your attention moves from one thing at a time. You may think that you live in a world full of your house and your mortgage and your family and your pets and your neighbors, but in fact you don't. In fact, you live in a world where just one thing arises in consciousness at a time. You can see this clearly in your own meditation. If you watch to a meditator, you observe this process, that the mind latches onto something, fires up this whole firework display of liking and disliking. From liking and disliking, you get desiring. From desiring, you get thinking. From thinking, you get attachment. From attachment, you get your mind stationed at that particular object or topic. So this is the process that we bring to a halt by withdrawing the mind from the 6 senses. And rather than dullness or emptiness or call the dial tone from God, the nothingness, what happens is your mind becomes brighter, sharper, clearer, and the mind accumulates, it gathers. The consciousness itself gathers into a central, powerful life force. So I was observing this process the other day. One of the insights that I have continually is how things become so important when you are looking at them that weren't important 10 minutes ago when you weren't looking at it, and aren't important in 10 minutes' time or a day's time when you're not looking at it. And the topic that I was reflecting on this with was Kevin Costner's divorce. Have you read about this? You know who Kevin Costner is, right? He's an actor. Well, supposedly an actor. Actually, he's pretty good, right? I always thought he was quite good. No? Dances with Wolves was quite good, and I always get him confused with Richard Gere. I'm sure he's done good stuff. And he's getting divorced, which is unfortunate and tragic, but his wife split from him, and she's gone to live in another house, and has was given a $80,000 a month fee to live on. And she complained that this wasn't enough because the house that she's living in doesn't have sea views. And his house has sea views. And that's not fair. So she went to court to demand more money so she can rent a house. She's renting a house at the moment, the non-sea view house, $40,000 a month. And it's not good enough. I don't like it. I liked my old house. Liking and disliking, right? This mechanism of liking and disliking when you see something or think about something, this liking and disliking propels you into desire, propels you into attachment, propels you into thinking, propels you into views and opinions, and then suddenly it's all really important. It's such suffering that I can't see the sea from my window. You should try living in my window. I have a big school and they painted the school yellow, so I have this big yellow kind of reflected sunlight coming into my room. What suffering? She complained that she has a daughter and 2 sons, and her 2 sons will have to share a bathroom. What suffering, how terrible. And then they went to court and the judge actually sided with Kevin Costner and reduced her amount of money, so she wasn't happy about that. Apparently they've made some kind of deal now. So I was reflecting on liking and disliking, that whatever your station is, even on $80,000 a month, you can still oh, I don't like this, or this isn't good enough. You get propelled into views and opinions. It's amazing how your opinions follow what you like and what you dislike, what you think is fair or unfair. You ever see people that say it's not fair? So many things in this world, it's not fair that this person has a higher salary than I have when I do the same job. It's not fair that blah, blah, blah. Everything's not fair. Tell you what's not fair. Somebody winning the lottery. That's not fair. But how many people win $1 million on the lottery and it's not fair, I got all this money for nothing and I didn't even work for it. It's not fair. What you think is fair, your views and opinions follow your liking and disliking. But the thing that I was reflecting on was just how much you start liking and disliking something just because you've looked at it, when a minute ago it didn't matter. Do you look at the cars and think it's not right? Some of these cars have burning petrol and some of them are electric. It's not right. I want electric cars only. And you can look outside and then start thinking, oh, this is a good car, this is a bad car. Just because it came into your mind. Yesterday you were just going down the street worrying about your visa or your tax or something. But just because you put your mind on it, suddenly liking and disliking fires up because you're thinking about it. So I was starting to think about whether Kevin Costner's wife should really have sea views, whether it was suffering not to have sea views. Before I caught myself, I've read this story. And because I've read this story, now I have liking and disliking. I have all this reflecting. I was reflecting on divorce laws and prenuptial agreements and civil court cases and how litigious America is. How they throw court cases at each other terribly. A friend of mine during COVID, he worked for a company that organizes websites, and websites get a ranking of how accessible they are to people, disabled people, I guess, or of either blind or minimal sight, deaf or minimal hearing, or unable to use a mouse. So you get a ranking on your website depending on how accessible it is for disabled people. And so he actually does this. He kind of does the ranking and advises people on how to update their website. And he was telling me that during COVID, a lot of the people weren't launching legal cases, so the lawyers were feeling a bit of the pinch of unemployment, these poor lawyers. So they would go around to businesses and look at businesses and start measuring their ramps to see if they were really accessible for wheelchairs. Start looking at their websites to see if they were accessible or not. And then launching law cases against these businesses for being inaccessible to disabled people. So my friend was quite busy because he was having all these businesses come to him and please make our websites accessible. So I was reflecting on how I don't like it and how this litigious culture is coming to Britain, and especially in the National Health Service, that anything goes wrong with an operation, you launch a law case against the hospital. And the hospital was saying that they just settle the cases. They just offer money and settle because it's cheaper than going to court. It's a great shame. But the day before, I didn't care about Kevin Costner and his wife. The next day, I didn't care about Kevin Costner and his wife. Again, it's gone. Why was it sparking this interest, this liking and disliking? Just because I'm looking at it. I find this quite fascinating. A few years ago, we had an event, and I got there early with a friend of mine. I said, can you put the chairs out? And we're in quite a large hall. This was at the dance center, if anyone was there, on Sukhumvit 26. And so I said to him, put the chairs out. And there's lots of space in this hall. And he put the chairs out, touching each other. Man, why do you do that? Nobody likes to sit in a chair where your knee and your elbow is touching someone. Why do you put the chairs out? So I'm looking at the way he's put the chairs out now, and I have this whole thing arise. I said, not like that. Nobody sits like that. Space them out. And I went off and I was putting some signs up so that people know which way to get up. And when I got back, he put all the chairs like 2 meters apart in the hall. So I have to measure. So I said, as wide as your fist goes, that's the distance between the chairs. Attachment, just because I'm looking at it right now. Everyone else came into the hall, they didn't care about the chairs. So do you notice that? If you've been doing your homework, liking and disliking get sparked up just because you're looking at something, thinking about something. You get cast into this liking and disliking. From liking and disliking, you get desiring. From desiring, you get thinking. From thinking, you get views and opinions. From views and opinions, you get attachment. From attachment, you get what we call bhava, or conscious engagement with that topic or thought or subject. In technical Buddhism, we call it object of sense. So, this is the central tenet of, in fact, all Theravada Buddhism. The Sakyamuni Buddha, our Buddha, was a Buddha of wisdom, enlightenment through analysis. There are 3 kinds of Buddha. Do you know this? You had a Buddha of faith, bhakti yoga. A Buddha of analysis, which was our Buddha, relied on wisdom as the vehicle for enlightenment rather than faith. And a wisdom-based Buddha has 10 times the reach of a faith-based Buddha. And then the third and highest kind of Buddha is a heroic struggle Buddha, virya, or energy, heroic struggle. And the next Buddha, Maitreya Buddha, will be a Buddha of heroic struggle, and his reach will be 10 times that of Sakyamuni. Apparently heroic struggle is the best of the vehicles. I like the analysis myself because I have that kind of mind. So Maitreya Buddha will have a vaster reach than our Buddha. I think that's because they'll have internet at that time. So he'll be able to get his message out a lot further. That's just my theory. So this is the way the Buddha taught, through a way of analysis, of wisdom, of analyzing or seeing the process in your mind. Your mind jumps from one thing to another thing to another thing. When it lands on something, it starts liking or disliking. If it doesn't like or dislike, this is the Pali word Vedana, or Vetana in Thai. If it doesn't like or dislike, it jumps to another thing or to another thing until it finds something that sparks either liking or disliking, an attachment. And there it will rest. There it will stay because of this process. Thinking, desiring, attaching, views and opinions, getting stationed at that thing. Suddenly that thing becomes so important. And that's how you live most of your life. So our practice as one of mindfulness is to be mindful of Vedana, liking and disliking. 3 kinds of Vedana, pleasant sensation, unpleasant sensation, neutral sensation. Or 5 kinds, pleasant sensation of the body, pleasant sensation, unpleasant sensation of the body, neutral sensation of the body, pleasant sensation of the mind, unpleasant sensation of the mind. 5 kinds of Vedanas. You can look at it either way. Both these models were applicable. Then, when liking and disliking, you feel this pushing and pulling in the mind. It's important not to get stuck on the philosophy, but to feel it directly, see it directly. That's mindfulness practice. It's what we should be doing. And you feel this pulling of the mind into the topic. Whether you like it or dislike it, either way you have what was called nandi. Nandi means holding in your hand. You pick this thing up and you hold it in your hand. You can feel the lure bringing your mind into it. If you are mindful, you can feel this lure, this liking and disliking, pulling and tugging in your mind without reacting to it, without launching into desiring, thinking, views and opinions, attachment, becoming. You can just feel like, oh, I've got this liking, I've got this disliking. And you can sit with that. If you can sit with it, you separate from it. When you separate from it, you have a sense of yourself, independent to the liking and disliking. You can see it come up, you can see it grab your attention, and then you see it fizzle out and die if you don't empower it. Seeing something arising and cease in original Buddhism is insight into non-self. Because you don't say, I arose and I ceased. You say, you have a sense of yourself separate to the liking and disliking. This was, to me, just an incredible empowerment. That not to get deluded into liking and disliking like this was just so empowering. And I find then that I can do all kinds of things that I thought I really disliked, that I didn't dislike so much. At the time, I'd left the monastery. I was working south of England as a chef, and it's funny because I really can't cook. And in the kitchen, we had a walk-in freezer, and you'd put things in the freezer, and you'd make like 50 of something, and you'd sell 45, and you take it off the menu, and the 5 things would get left over. So in the freezer, there was always things that start accumulating that got left over. So every so often, the head chef would come along and he'd shout at somebody and clean the freezer out. Everyone, oh, I don't want to clean the freezer, I haven't got time. The reason you didn't like it was the ice on the top of the freezer would start melting while you're standing in there. And it goes on your shoulder, and it's just freezing cold water. And it soaks your shoulders and really makes your shoulders start to hurt. So it's quite unpleasant to go in and clean out the freezer. Disliking. You tell me, like, I'm there, like, go and clean out the freezer. You get everything, all your preparation done. You think, yeah, I've got half an hour. And you sit down. He's like, what are you doing sitting down? Go and clean the freezer out. So, just liking and disliking, it's not that bad in the freezer. I don't know about you, I feel quite nice when I've cleaned something up and tidied something. I actually feel like, I don't know, there's a word for it. You know, you feel the satisfaction. You feel like you've put something, what? Yeah, accomplishment. You feel like you've ordered something. You live in this world where you can't control anything, and then just, I controlled the freezer. So you feel... And oftentimes I'd find stuff in the freezer, and I'm like, oh, we can use that on the menu. It means I don't have to prepare something, I'll just use this, something that has been made beforehand. So I would get in, and when I had half an hour free in the morning, I'd go and clean the freezer out, go and sort the freezer without being asked. Head chef thought I was absolutely wonderful. Gave me a little buzz of, yeah, I'm the best guy in the kitchen. And then when he did yell at somebody, go and clean the freezer out, he wouldn't tell me, he'd tell one of the others. And they'd be like, oh, he can do it. No, I want you to do it. And they'd go trudging off to the freezer with a sour face, and I'd be sitting there all smug, self-satisfied, and superior, you see. Just because you get over liking and disliking. I learned this in the monastery. We had a lot of jobs in the morning. Some people made breakfast. Some people emptied the bins, some people watered the plants, somebody fed the cat. Of course, everybody wants the cat feeding, and nobody wants the bin emptying. Just liking and disliking. So I was observing this process. Like, I can empty the bins. Why do I want one of the other people to empty the bins? I'll just empty the bins as an offering to everybody else. Yeah. Until I get the cat feeding duty. The stupid cat had fleas, and then I was feeding it every morning, so it came onto my bed and gave my bed fleas. So it wasn't such a good thing in the end. This empowerment to not be chained to liking and disliking is really changed my life. One of the beautiful things that I got from Vipassana meditation. Shortly after I left the temple, I went into a house, stayed in a house in Wimbledon with some friends of mine, and it's kind of like a student's house. None of us had any money, and what we did, we spent on wine instead of food, and you know, we lived on rice and lentils and things, and there was always a pile of washing up, and everybody swore that it was everybody else's washing up. I'm like, I can just do the washing up as an offering to the other people in the house. I just do it and not complain and not bother about the liking and disliking in my mind. I just do it. And then I quite enjoy it. It's quite nice to do washing up for everyone. And then they get home from work. I wasn't working, that's fair enough. And then everything's cleaned up. And I get a lot of karma credits. Do you know about karma credits? So this is the process. You're able to sit and feel the liking and disliking, the pushing and pulling in the mind, and then make the decision. Are you going to follow that or not? Are you going to act out of the id, the pleasure principle, the animalistic, pleasant and unpleasant, or are you going to act from the ego? In psychology, ego is a good thing. And do what's right and what's wise and what's nice. So you get the choice to be able to do this. But just to finish off, I wanted to emphasize and stress, because some of the Vipassana schools kind of stop here and they say just observe, always observe, and never tell you why you should observe. The reason you're observing this process of the mind is to see when the mind lands on something it starts liking and disliking. It's not that our practice is one of just letting things be in the mind, seeing it come up and seeing it disappear. No. The practice is one of knowing this process and being able to withdraw the mind from it altogether. This process where the mind continually reaches out and lands on this thing, on this thing, and this thing. continually moves from object to object until it finds something that will lure it in, spark this process, liking, disliking, desiring, thinking, attachment, views and opinions, consciousness being stationed at that thing. Now you are caught in it. But what happens when you are not caught in anything? When the mind stops this entire process itself, mindfulness starts to return. Real mindfulness, not mindfulness of this thing. Originally, mindfulness was sati, sampajanya, sati, to recall, to remember. Sampajanya, the life force, awareness itself. When you remember just awareness itself, the mind isn't getting caught in anything. For most people, they don't know what this is. And as soon as you reach a moment where nothing's happening, you'll immediately reach out for something to do, something to think about, put on a radio, sing a song, clean something up, go for a sleep. Immediately try to fill that void. Practice being able to settle into that, just life itself, knowing itself, awake, aware. Then you are putting aside the hindrances. Putting aside the hindrances, the mind gathers. When the mind gathers together, it becomes bright. As the mind becomes bright, it's centered in the body becomes pleasant to awareness. As it becomes pleasant to awareness, concentration will naturally sit with this generalized body awareness because it's pleasant to do so. This pleasant you can indulge. This is not pleasant of the sense desires, of sensory experience. As you enter into that, you sharpen the mind. Sharpening the mind, it becomes percipient of light, becomes energetic, becomes self-knowing. From this self-knowing, you can concentrate the mind further and further. As the mind concentrates and comes in and out of concentration, you see this world arise and this world ceasing. From that point, then you know this is attachment and engagement in the world. This is the brightness, the energy, the power that arises when you are withdrawn from the senses. So this is when the turtle withdraws its limbs. When the turtle withdraws its limbs, the scriptures appear on the back of the turtle. So you'll see this also in Buddhism, the image of the scriptures on the back of a turtle. That's why they appear there. You see them in Thailand, by the way, in almost every temple. You have like a pond, and in the pond is a hut on stilts, and in that hut is supposed to be stored the scriptures. And it's in a pond because it stops the insects getting into the scriptures. So you also have that image in Thailand of the turtles are the ones who protect the teaching, the scriptures. So I'm going to stop there and leave it there. I wanted to just read out very shortly the Buddha's description of this. As always, it's very short and sharp. Doing this practice, he remains thus heedful, ardent, resolute. Any memories and resolves related to the household life are abandoned, and with their abandoning, his mind gathers and settles inwardly. It grows unified and centered. This is how a monk develops mindfulness. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. It's all clear. This is how the Sakyamuni Buddha, original Buddha, actually taught. So I hear a lot of teachings around the place which are pseudo-psychology and Freudian stuff and self-help. This is what he actually taught and the way that he taught it. Anyone have a question or comment? Joe. Yeah, your beliefs follow what you like and dislike, right? Then you justify what it is, whatever it is. The kind of government you want to vote for, it's like, well, I like this guy, I don't like this guy, and I'll vote for this one. And then suddenly your views and opinions are stationed with that thing. Just about everything, yeah. Believe in rebirth and reincarnation. I do think God is love, though. Because God's love shines like His rain falls on the wise and the unwise. The sunlight falls on the just and the unjust, right? So I think that's God. Depends, there's so much stuff in the Old Testament and New Testament that you can pretty much find any God that you want. There's a terrific book called The History of God by Elizabeth. Anyone read that? History of God? Karen Armstrong, yes. Really good book, but a little hard to read, somewhat academic. But she traces the different ideas of God and how originally God was a tribal God. My God beats your God in a war, in a battle. And then it became a tribal God but would welcome anybody else into it. And then eventually became a God that is the only God, not my God better than other gods. And she tracks the history of all the different views that cultures have had of God. And she's a Buddhist, by the way, right? She's a practicing Buddhist. So she has good insight into Dharma too, and includes Buddhism in her analysis. But the conclusion I came from that book is what any kind of idea you have about God has been done before. There's been a group somewhere that had a church that taught that thing. There was a church that taught the God of the Old Testament was an evil God and the New Testament was a good God, and then there's the Gnostic. I mean, it's all been done before. So, yeah, you can find anything you want. But it follows what you like and dislike, right? Yeah. No, you don't have to stand up.
So maybe you talk about it, but probably I didn't catch it. So what drive like and dislike?
That's the pleasure principle. Freud called the pleasure principle that a animal is driven solely by what it likes and dislikes. So you squirt a dog with a hose pipe and it dislikes it, or you show it the bath. You know, the dogs hate the bath, right? And then you give it a bone and it likes it. So its whole character is driven by this liking and disliking. Evolutionary psychology, which I'm not a big believer in, but they say it's a shortcut to decision making. If you had to analyze everything and decide whether it's good or bad, then it would take too much time. So we have a drive for like sugar and salt. So things that are salty we like because evolution has taught us to favor things with salt. Salt was hard to come by for many cultures. And so we are driven evolutionary to like salt. So now manufacturers put salt in your food and you have this hyperstimulation that because you want to get that salt, it's nice, you like it. But that liking has been taught by evolution into animals' psyches so that they know what to do without thinking about it. If you see a lion and you think, do I like it or dislike it? Are they good or are they bad? I mean, you're finished.
So how about the species that live inside our bodies? Do you think they have the influence on our likes and dislikes?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't know about the other species. There's a theory that says every cell in the body is a living thing, and it has its own agenda. Things that it takes in and things that it pushes out, things that it defends against. And the cells have these little pipes that let certain things in and push certain things out. And these are controlled by hormones. So your hormones will shut off certain of their pipes and open up other pipes. So your cells all know what to do. For example, adrenaline will shut down the blood to a lot of the internal organs and push blood out to the external limbs. adrenaline will stop you feeling hungry because you don't want to eat when a lion is about to come and get you. You know, you shouldn't be thinking about food. So there is an argument for that. But I would say that hormones drive a lot of our behavior. You know, there's a hormone that determines when you feel full and when you feel hungry. So if you take two hungry dogs, you feed one till it's full, and then you transfuse the blood between the two dogs and offer them both food. The first dog will eat again, but the second dog that didn't eat won't want to eat because of the hormones in the blood. So whether you want to eat or not eat is determined by these hormones. One thing that happens, if you eat and you get fatter, the fat actually produces the full hormone to stop you from eating. But if you're chronically overweight, that process stops working. So when you get the hungry hormone, it takes longer for that to get suppressed, so you eat more. So even how much food you eat is determined to a large part by your hormones. And if something goes wrong in your hormone system, this can make you overeat or undereat. And this is one reason why a lot of old people start losing weight, because they don't get that hunger hormone anymore like you used to get. So they simply don't need to eat as much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is that it? Or good? Actually, one last question at the back there.
There is a temptation when observing the liking and disliking mind to dislike it. I'm not being clever on purpose. I'm trying to understand how to approach emotionally and how to aim myself at this observation. Do I say, oh, why do I like or and dislike things, or do I try
No.
to apply metta?
No. Don't interfere with it, because then you're fiddling with it. Then you're liking or disliking, you're liking and you're disliking. And you get the thing, well, I have to fix myself. I have to like these things and stop disliking these things. Your practice as mindfulness is to observe it. Observe that liking or disliking, the pushing and pulling in the mind. But you're holding yourself steady. Let it push and pull. And then it will dissipate all by itself. You don't need to interfere. Unless you get really into, like, you're actually going to strangle somebody, then you should interfere with your disliking and try to apply metta. Might be too late by then, but as a mindfulness practitioner, no, you don't need to interfere.
When you say dissipate, do you mean during a meditation, during an hour, or during the long-term, year-long practice?
No, this one Dharma only applies to this one thing that has just arisen in perceptive consciousness. Don't worry about the rest of your life, whether you like your government or the weather or traffic or health or doctors or whatever it is. Don't worry. You're only concerned with this one thing that's just arisen now. That's the only place where you do practice. Otherwise, you've just got too much stuff to fix. So Buddhism is phenomenological. I'm surprised I can say that. Is only interested in the one thing that's arisen. So, you know, I get taxis, and I quite like sitting in a taxi. I like journeying to places for some weird reason. I feel very patient in vehicles, so long as they're driving okay. But I don't like the taxi driver talking to me. And often they're like, oh, when did you ordain? How long have you been a monk? When did you come to Thailand? I've tried different strategies to stop them from talking to me. That's my disliking arising right there. That's where my practice is. I can watch that disliking, and it will dissipate in front of me, and it's gone. And then the taxi driver is still talking to me, but I'm no longer disliking it. Maybe I start liking it. I feel that then. Maybe I want to talk. I want to have a chat. Taxi drivers give me a lot, used to, it's not so much, maybe it's because I'm old, but they used to give me a lot of opinions, tell me all what's wrong about Thai monks and monasteries, or tell me about their favorite monastery, or which is the best abbot to go and see. I used to get a lot of people doing this, giving me their views and opinions. Yeah. Okay, if we're good, we can wrap up. little early. I'm ready to go. So, okay, we're good.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Pandit, for teaching us again some very interesting lessons today. Thank you all for being here and supporting each other in our practice. Next week and the week after that, Pandit will be on retreat, but not to worry. Next week we have another monk speaking here, Ajahn Medino. Also a very interesting monk, a guy who went to Sri Lanka and in the mountains, in the forest, built his own kuti and stayed there as a hermit for a very long time. And then he recently came back to Thailand and he will teach us next week. And the Monday after that, the 4th of December, we will have the Dhamma Circle again. And that's a group of people coming together and studying a book, reading it together and discussing what they see there and trying to learn more about what the Buddha was actually teaching. And then after that, Pandit will be back again. The other thing that we have on the program is from 8 to 12 December there is a retreat with Ajahn Susito, a highly respected monk in Amsterdam, some 40 kilometers up north from here. Transport will be arranged from here, going to the ashram. There are still a few seats available. The price is very affordable for something like 3,500 baht. You get accommodation, food, and the transportation. That's a little bit more than $100, a little bit less than €100.
That includes the bus, the minivan fare.
Yeah.
Okay.
The minibus, the price for a double room is 3,100 baht. The minivan will depend on how many people we have in the van, because you pay a price for the van. If the van is full, you just divide by 9. If there are seats left, it's a little bit more expensive. It's about 600 baht for the van, and 3,100 for a double room, so that's 3,700 baht.
Okay.
Nice.
Where do we sign up for that?
Where are you?
Where do we?
Where's the information?
Look at our website, look at our Facebook and our meetup. There you will find the reference. There's a link to the website of Micah there, and that's where you can sign up.
Okay. Super.
Don't wait too long. There are still a few seats available, but Mike has to arrange, for instance, the vans, and so soon the window will